I paid rent for my sister and her fiancé for 8 months straight. But on Dad's birthday I overheard them joking, "He's too dumb to realize we'll never pay him back." I said nothing and stopped paying. A month later they showed up crying at my door saying the landlord. My sister Tara always had this way of turning her mistakes into someone else's responsibility. She was younger than me by 4 years, but somehow managed to make it seem like she'd survived a harder life. I bought into it for a long time. I figured, hey, she's family. He just needs a break. What I didn't realize at the time was how easy it is for some people to take advantage of kindness when they know you'll never call them out. It started with a late-night phone call. Tara was crying. She and Mark had been living in this apartment just outside of Cincinnati for 6 months, and apparently they were already 2 months behind on rent. Their landlord had sent them a final notice. They had 5 days to pay or leave. She didn't ask directly. She said things like, "I don't know what we're going to do, and if we end up on the street it's just gonna break Mom." She dropped Mark's name constantly, made it sound like they were in this desperate situation together, fighting for their future. I told her I'd help. I transferred $1,050 to their landlord the next morning. That was the first month. It became routine after that. Every month on the first I'd send money straight to the landlord. Tara would text me the amount, usually somewhere between $900 and $1,200. I didn't ask why it fluctuated. I didn't ask what Mark was doing for work or why Tara, who claimed to have picked up freelance gigs, couldn't manage a couple $100s herself. I just kept sending money. In April I paid for their rent the same week I was hit with a $780 car repair bill. I dipped into my savings and ate peanut butter sandwiches for 9 days straight. I kept telling myself they'll pay me back. I was tracking everything on a spreadsheet just to keep myself from feeling like a fool. Every time I updated it I imagined them someday showing up with a check, hugging me, saying something like, "We never could have made it without you." That illusion shattered on my dad's birthday. We had this little backyard dinner, something low-key. My mom grilled burgers, my aunt brought pie, and I remember Dad being in a really good mood. Tara and Mark showed up late, but no one minded. They smiled, laughed, acted like everything was fine. Around 9 I stepped out to my car to grab the board game I promised to bring. On the way back I passed the side of the house. That's when I heard them. They were standing near the porch, just out of view, voices low but not low enough. Mark said, "He's too dumb to realize we'll never pay him back." Tara laughed. Not awkwardly, just casually, like they'd had this conversation before. She said something I'll never forget. "Why would we? He acts like it's his job to save everyone." I just stood there. I didn't say anything that night. I smiled through the game, hugged everyone goodbye, and went home. I laid in bed for hours, going over every dollar I'd sent, every lie they'd told. I looked at my spreadsheet and deleted it. The next month I didn't send anything. I blocked Tara's landlord's number. No one texted. Not Tara, not Mark. Nothing. I thought maybe they'd figured it out, maybe someone else was footing the bill now. I didn't really care. Then for weeks later I came home from work to find them standing on my doorstep. Tara was crying. Her hair was wet from the rain. Mark looked like he hadn't showered. Their stuff was packed into the back seat of an old Honda. "The landlord locked us out," she said. "We're homeless. We didn't know who else to come to." I just stared at them. Not angry, not smug. Just empty. That was the moment I realized I wasn't their safety net. I was their plan. Their only plan. And now that it was gone, they were finally facing the consequences. I didn't invite them inside. Tara was soaked, holding her phone in one hand and a half-torn grocery bag in the other. Mark stood behind her with his hood up and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. They looked exactly like what they were, 2 people who had finally run out of road. She said the landlord had thrown their stuff onto the curb and changed the locks. That they hadn't even gotten a warning. That it wasn't legal and they were going to file something. I don't even remember what. The way she said it was like she thought I'd be shocked, like I'd take their side without asking a single question. But I wasn't shocked. I asked her when the last time they paid rent was. He paused too long. Looked at Mark like she wanted him to answer. He said it was a while ago, and blamed some vague emergency I didn't even ask about. I wasn't interested in excuses anymore. I told them I'd heard what they said on Dad's birthday. Tara froze. Mark actually looked surprised for a second, like he'd forgotten it even happened. She started to say it was a joke. That I misheard. That I took it out of context. She even laughed a little, but it was the wrong kind of laugh. The kind you use when you're stalling. I asked her how long they'd planned to keep taking money from me. She didn't answer. Then I said the thing I'd been holding in for 8 months. That I wasn't their bank. I wasn't their backup plan. I was done. The moment she realized I wasn't going to offer them a place to stay, everything shifted. Her tone snapped from soft to sharp. She called me selfish. Said I was punishing them during their worst moment. Said I owed her after everything she'd been through. That if roles were reversed she'd help me. I didn't believe that for a second. She said it was just a few nights. Just until they found something. Just until they figured it out. But that's what she always said. Just until. Always temporary, always a promise that never led anywhere. I told them no. Tara's eyes filled up again, but this time she wasn't sad. She was furious. Mark just stood there like a statue staring at the ground. They left without another word. Got into their beat-up car and drove off. I watched them go. I didn't cry. I didn't second-guess myself. I went inside and made dinner. The silence afterward was strange. Not peaceful, just empty. I thought that would be it. Maybe they'd move in with one of Mark's friends or go back to Tara's old college roommate. Maybe they'd finally try to stand on their own. But 2 days later my phone rang. It was my mom. She didn't say hi. She didn't ask how I was doing. She went straight into it. What the hell is wrong with you? Tara had told her everything, well, her version. That they got kicked out. That they were sleeping in their car. That they had no money, no options, no one else. And that her own sister had turned her away. I tried to explain. Told her about the rent I'd been paying for 8 months straight. How I'd never gotten a cent back. How they made fun of me behind my back while I was draining my savings to keep them afloat. She didn't believe it. Or maybe she didn't want to. Family doesn't turn their backs on each other, she said. You think you're better than her just because you have a job and an apartment? I asked her if she'd let Tara and Mark move in with her. Silence. Of course she wouldn't. She and Dad barely had enough space for themselves. She wanted me to deal with it. Because I was the oldest. Because I had a steady income. Because I was the responsible one. That was always the dynamic growing up. Tara messed up and I fixed it. She cried and I made it better. She wrecked something and I paid for it, literally in this case. I ended the call before it could get worse. That night I got one message from Tara. I hope you're happy. We have nowhere else to go. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned my phone off and went to bed. But I knew this wasn't over. They weren't going to disappear quietly. The next move wasn't going to be theirs. It was going to be my parents. And they weren't coming to ask nicely. It started with a group text. My dad, who almost never texted anyone unless it was logistics or weather updates, suddenly sent this massive paragraph in the family group chat. But the moment I read it, I knew it wasn't really from him. It had my mom's fingerprints all over it. Too many exclamation points. Too many lines like, family sticks together no matter what. And it's not about money, it's about compassion. And the one that really stuck. We're so disappointed in how cold you've been. What would Grandma think if she saw this? I didn't reply. An hour later my Aunt Lisa called. She's been the designated family peacekeeper since forever. She tried to sound casual like she was just checking in, but within 2 minutes she was talking about Tara. Apparently Tara and Mark were staying at a cheap motel. The kind with flickering neon signs and vending machines that haven't been restocked in years. They had just enough left on one of Mark's credit cards to maybe last 2 nights. Lisa said Mark was looking for work, and Tara was trying to stay positive. Then she slipped in what she'd really called to say. Grace, maybe this has gone a little too far. You've made your point. Don't you think it's time to be the bigger person? The bigger person. What? I'd heard that before. It always meant the same thing. Swallow your feelings, fix the mess, and pretend nothing happened. I told her about the 8 months of rent I'd paid. About how I'd overheard them mocking me. I even said the exact words Mark had used. He's too dumb to realize we'll never pay him back. She was quiet for a bit. Then she gave me the line I knew was coming. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. They were probably just embarrassed you had to help so much. So now it was my fault for helping. I thanked her for the call and hung up before she could keep going. Later that night I took my trash out and noticed a familiar car parked across the street. At first I thought I was imagining it. But I recognized the busted left taillight and the stupid bumper sticker Mark put on last year. Tara's Honda. I stood on the porch for a moment, waiting. Then my phone buzzed. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes. I didn't respond. The next morning I woke up to a voicemail from my dad. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse. Calm. Measured. Disappointed. He said my mom hadn't slept, that she was heartbroken, and that Tara was in danger sleeping in a car. He ended with, "This isn't like you, Grace. We raced you better than this." That line hit harder than I expected. But it also made something very clear. No one wanted to look at the truth. No one wanted to talk about how Tara had used me, laughed at me, lied to me. They didn't want facts. They wanted me to make the problem go away. To them I wasn't Grace, their daughter. I was Grace, the one with the paycheck, the apartment, and the endless patience. So that weekend I drove to my parents' house to say what I needed to say in person. The minute I walked in I regretted it. The air felt heavy. My mom barely looked at me. My dad didn't even ask how I was. Finally he looked up from the newspaper and said, You need to fix this. Not we. Not let's talk about it. Just me. I asked him why it was always my job to fix it. He didn't answer. My mom just muttered something about how Tara was fragile. I finished my coffee, put the cup in the sink, and left. That night, Tara sent one more message. Please. One night. Just until we figure something out. But I'd figured it out already. One night would turn into 1 week, then 1 month, and I'd be right back to where I started. I didn't respond. I turned my phone off and went to bed. But I knew this wasn't the end. Not even close. 3 days passed without a single message from anyone. No text from Tara. No calls from my parents. Not even one of those guilt-loaded motivational memes my mom loved to post when she was upset but pretending she wasn't. I started to think maybe, just maybe, it was over. I was wrong. That Thursday, I pulled into my driveway after work and saw my mom's car parked in front of my house. She was already waiting on the porch with a Tupperware container in her hands, like this was just a friendly visit. I could tell she was trying to soften me up before whatever lecture she had planned. She didn't even wait for me to unlock the door. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, she said, Tara's barely eating. She's sick with stress. And you're just ignoring her. I opened the door and let her in because I didn't feel like arguing on the front steps. She went straight to the kitchen, put the container on the counter like she still lived there, and turned around with this look like I had personally betrayed her. I told her I was sorry Tara was struggling, but I wasn't going to fix it this time. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. So that's it? You're really going to let your own sister live in a car? I didn't answer. She stepped closer, lowered her voice, and said, You were raised better than this, Grace. I taught you to have compassion. We helped each other in this family. That was rich. I couldn't remember the last time Tara had helped me with anything. I said I wasn't turning my back on family. I was just refusing to keep being the family's ATM. I told her how I'd overheard them laughing about never paying me back and how not one person, not Tara, not Mark, not even Mom or Dad, had once said thank you for those 8 months of rent. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. She just sighed and said, You've always been strong. She's not like you. She's delicate. Delicate. That was the moment something shifted in me. She wasn't just defending Tara. She was making excuses for her. So, my mom stayed another 10 minutes, mostly repeating the same guilt trip phrases, then left without finishing her coffee. The soup she brought sat untouched on my counter. Later that night, Tara called. I let it ring out. The voicemail was almost all crying. She said they'd run out of gas money, that they were parked behind a gas station, that she hadn't showered in 4 days, that she was scared. The next morning, I got a call from my brother Josh. He's usually the quiet one in the family, the guy who avoids drama like it's his job. If he was calling, I knew my parents had pulled him in. He said Mom and Dad were talking about letting Tara and Mark move back in for a while, but only if I agreed to support them financially until they got back on their feet. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd I didn't know how else to react. Josh said, I'm not saying you should, I'm just telling you what they're saying. They think you owe her at least that much. Owe her. That word again. I told him I wasn't paying for anything. If Mom and Dad wanted to take them in, that was their call. But I wasn't funding it. I was done. Josh was quiet for a second. Then he said, You know this is going to explode, right? I said, It already has. That night around midnight I saw headlights sweep across my window. I peeked out and saw Tara's car parked across the street again. She wasn't trying to hide. She sat in the driver's seat staring at my house. I didn't go out there. I didn't text her. I just watched her sit there for nearly an hour before she drove off. The next morning my parents were waiting for me outside my office building. I hadn't even gotten to the door before my dad stepped in front of me. His tone was calm, which made it worse. You need to fix this, he said. I told him I wasn't fixing anything. Not anymore. I laid it all out, how I'd spent thousands of dollars trying to help, how I got laughed at behind my back, how everyone suddenly expected me to keep sacrificing while Tara contributed nothing. He shook his head and said, This isn't about money. You're tearing this family apart. I told him no, I was just refusing to clean up someone else's mess for once. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Then he said something that stuck in my head for days. If she doesn't make it through this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And then he walked away. I stood there for a few minutes after they left, trying to breathe. I had always known my family was a little unbalanced, but I didn't realize until that moment how deep the expectations ran, and how alone I actually was. After that scene outside my office, everything went quiet again. Not the kind of quiet where things are resolved. More like the eye of a storm where everything holds still for a second before it all comes crashing down again. No messages. No calls. No parked car across the street. It was as if my family had collectively decided to freeze me out. For a few days I tried to convince myself they were moving on. Maybe Tara had found a place to stay. Maybe Mark picked up some kind of job. Maybe they were finally doing something about the mess they made. But then the next wave hit. It started small. A DM from someone I barely remembered, Tara's old college roommate, I think. Is it true you're letting her live in her car while you sit comfortably in your own place? Then came another message from some mutual friend of Mark's. Family doesn't do that to each other. You think money makes you better. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly experts on my life, weighing in from behind their screens like they knew anything about what I'd done for Tara. And then something I didn't expect. A handwritten letter. 2 pages. From my mom. The envelope was thin, the handwriting instantly familiar. She hadn't written me a letter since I was in high school. The tone wasn't angry, it was worse. It was sad. Disappointed. Carefully chosen words that felt like they'd been rehearsed, rewritten, and polished to perfection. She said she knew Tara had made mistakes. That she and Mark weren't perfect. That maybe they didn't always say the right things. But she also said I had let my pride and resentment cloud my judgment. She wrote, "There may come a time when Tara's not here anymore and you'll wish you hadn't turned your back." That sentence sat in my head for hours. She ended with, "I don't expect you to change your mind today. But I hope your heart softens before it's too late." I didn't respond. I folded the letter, placed it in my drawer, and walked away. The very next day my boss called me into his office. He was polite about it but firm. Someone, he didn't say who but I didn't have to guess, had shown up at the office earlier that morning asking to speak with me. He said, "I don't know what's going on, but I'd prefer if personal matters stayed off company grounds." I nodded, apologized, and walked out feeling like I'd stepped into some alternate reality where my life was a bad soap opera. That night I turned off my phone completely. I couldn't handle one more message from someone telling me what kind of sister I should be. And for a moment things really did go silent. Until Saturday morning. I opened the door expecting a delivery and saw Mark standing there. Alone. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, wearing the same hoodie I'd seen him in a dozen times before. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't try to defend himself. He just stood there holding a beat-up envelope. "I know we don't deserve your help. And I know I was an ass. I just want you to know we're trying now." He handed me the envelope. Inside were receipts, motel stays, notes about job applications, shifts at some warehouse, even a list of stuff they'd sold, old electronics, furniture, a guitar. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just thought maybe you deserved to see it." And then he left. No speech. No tears. Just gone. I stared at that envelope for a long time. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I felt something I hadn't expected. Quiet. Not silence from being ignored, but actual quiet. Like the start of something real. The next morning I woke up to a message from Tara. No long explanations. No guilt tripping. Just one line. "Thank you for making me face it." No emojis. No drama. Just words. And for once they sounded like hers. I stared at her message. "Thank you for making me face it." No emojis. No whining. No, but. It was the first time in years that Tara had said something that didn't feel like it came with strings. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how. It wasn't like I'd been waiting for an apology or expecting her to suddenly grow a conscience. In truth, I'd made peace with never hearing a word from her again. But that message hit differently. It didn't fix everything, but it cracked open the part of me that still wondered if there was anything left of the sister I used to know. I left it on read. For almost 3 full days. Then on a Tuesday morning just before 9 there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw her. No car behind her. No Mark. No tears, no makeup. Just Tara standing there in an oversized sweatshirt and jeans holding nothing. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't open with excuses. She just said, "I don't want anything. I just needed to say something in person." I let her talk. He said she was sorry. That wasn't new, but what came next was. She told me she used to think of me as a backup plan. A cushion. A lifeline that never snapped no matter how far she pushed. That when she and Mark laughed that night it wasn't because they thought I was dumb. It was because they felt ashamed. And shame's easier to carry when you dress it up like superiority. She admitted they never expected to pay me back. Not because they didn't want to, but because they never thought they'd get their lives together long enough to be able to. And she hated herself for that. She said she hated the person she was becoming, the way she looked at me like I was just another resource to tap into. She said, "I got so used to you saving me that I forgot how to stand." That part got to me. She told me about sleeping in the car, how the nights got so cold they ran the engine for heat, then turned it off in 30-minute intervals to save gas. How they parked behind gas stations scared someone would knock on the window. He said the worst part wasn't the hunger or the cold. It was realizing that, for the first time, no one was coming. Not me. Not my parents. No one. And in that silence, she finally had to face herself. That was when things started to shift. Mark got a warehouse job through a temp agency. She picked up part-time work at a daycare where they didn't ask too many questions. They sold off everything they didn't need. Got a tiny studio above an auto shop. Half the outlets don't work and the hot water's hit or miss, but it's theirs. She looked at me and said, I don't want to go back to who I was. And I don't expect us to be close again. I just want you to know I'm trying. For real this time. I didn't say much. I was still processing it. But before she left, I said, I forgive you. Felt strange to say it. Not because it wasn't true, but because I meant it more than I thought I would. Tara didn't cry. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to come in. She just nodded, said thank you, and walked back down the steps. That night, I sat with the envelope Mark had given me. The receipts, the job applications, the list of things they'd sold. I didn't owe them anything anymore. But I didn't feel angry. Felt relieved. We're not close now. But we talk. Once a week maybe. She updates me on how things are going, little things. I don't press. I don't offer money. I just listen. My parents eventually quieted down. I think even they started to see the shift in Tara. The drama fizzled when the pressure wasn't working anymore. And I've drawn my boundaries, clear and firm. But something happened I didn't expect. On my birthday, a small envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a folded piece of paper. A note. I'm not where I want to be yet. But thanks to you, I finally believe I can get there. And taped to the bottom was a crisp $20 bill. It wasn't about the money. Not at all. It was what it meant. That for the first time in her life, she wanted to give something back. And that was enough. I tucked the note away in the back of my drawer, not because I needed to keep it, but because something about it felt like closure, like a chapter that had finally finished turning. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel that heavy, restless tension in my chest. I wasn't waiting for the next mess. I wasn't bracing for another knock on the door. I was just still. And I realized maybe this was what peace actually felt like.